Amazing. Timer starts now. Mark. Hi, I'm Ford.
And I'm Sky. And these are not our real names. These are our superhero names, and with our powers combined, we formed the writing partnership L. Skyford. Welcome to Booklandia.
You've joined us today for a minisode, where we will geek out about literary topics like plot and character tropes, and maybe some book news. But before we get much further, did you know you can watch our faces do this episode by subscribing to us on Twitch at L. Skyford or YouTube at L.Skyford? You should do it. We give good face.
And sometimes there's a dog bomb at Ford's house.
This is true. For our other socials, you can follow us on Twitter at SkyfordL, on Instagram at L.Skyford. And if you're interested in our book, blog, or even more book reviews, head over to our website, lskyford.com.
Lastly, this and every episode are chock full of oversharing and spoilers, and every episode is rated E for explicit. You have been warned.
Hi!
Hi. Excellent. Hi. Okay.
Everything. What a
I'm
day.
gonna take these away. Okay. So, and then I'm gonna push. This might be disastrous. I'm pushing a button I am not sure about.
Here we go.
This button will reveal what we are talking about today. So here's the
Excellent.
button.
Let's see how it goes.
Woo! It worked.
Hey! For those of you listening, what it says is romance versus erotica.
Excellent.
So
This is
yeah.
Go ahead.
Go for it. You go. No, you go.
All right. So, fantastic. So, firstly, you need to. This is trope talk, right? This minisode is really about the larger genres of romance versus erotica. So, not really trope talk, like big picture romance v erotica. I'm gonna put on my professor glasses. For those of you listening.
Girl! Oh, it's half. Oh my god!
There's
You're
no
like
sound.
80% sexier there.
No, just nerdier. I'll take it. Thank you.
Nope.
I'm gonna go with thank you
welcome.
to that as a response.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're gonna define romance and erotica, and then we're gonna talk about how they're different in the way that you and I think about them, not in some sort of like literary, we took a course about this way, because we did not do that.
No, neither of us are English majors. Both of us are theater majors. So our literature is a little bit different in that regard. I also realized that I didn't put this in our script. Sorry. But I think we should talk about why this is our first minisode episode. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, great. Okay, fantastic. I felt like this is step one in if we were teaching a romance course 101, the difference between romance and erotica, I think, is a very important delineation, because I started reading romance wanting it to be erotica. And in fact, I still want all romance to be erotica. I need more sex, more graphic and explicit sex.
There you go.
So I thought other people might also be interested and want to talk about that. Also, it's fun to talk about sex, baby.
Yay with the reference. Yeah, so let's really talk about what is the big difference, because I feel like for some people, they don't know that there is a difference, or they assume that all romance is erotica, or maybe the inverse is true. I've definitely come across people's reviews of things where they found the sexual content of a book to be too much, and it's always come to me as a surprise when I read that. I'm like, this is romance, of course there's going to be sexual content, but I guess not everyone is looking for that in their romance novels the way that I am.
I don't know who these people are and if we could be friends. But also, so in doing research for this episode, we looked at a bunch of best of erotica lists, and many of the books on that list, per our delineation, weren't erotica. They were romance. So let's explain our opinions to the people.
Okay, so by my definition, romance is a story that is emotionally satisfying and has an optimistic ending. Sometimes there is sex. Every time there is a happily ever after or a happily for now, but the
Mhm.
implication of a romance novel is that it ends in a happy conclusion.
Yes, correct. Agree.
Okay, so this is my erotica definition, and it's
Uh-huh.
to me this is really self-evident, but here it is. In erotica, the sexual element drives the plot. There is usually still a happily ever after or a happily for now, but the crux of the story is dependent on our characters having intercourse with each other or
Mhm.
having intercourse, end of sentence.
Yes. Truth. I also agree.
Excellent. So those are how I separate the two, whether or not the plot is driven by the sex act or if
Mhm.
the sexual relationship is part of the character development and not a plot
Mhm.
driver, a plot
Yeah.
device, if you will.
Right. 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 So why would a reader choose one over the other or go out searching one over the other?
Well, I mean,
For me,
yeah, go ahead.
I the type of escapism I want in a book that has sex is the sex. I want someone to describe sex real good to me in words, in
In a
written
word,
words. Yeah.
that's your
Anywho, in
kink.
plain
That
black and white. That's my oh my gosh. Is this my kink? Episode 1 and we're already on my first kink. Okay. Um, and so, like, sometimes a romance is just cute and it doesn't really do it for me. It doesn't help with the horniness or whatever. So, that's me and why I like erotica.
I see. So I have different needs on different days, and
True. Yeah,
sometimes it
also
needs to
yeah.
be slow and lovely and gushy and emotional, and I want a really significant character arc, and sometimes I want an extremely descriptive, very explicit pounding type of scene. So I should have waited before you finished
Never
drinking so
wait.
that this would not be a spit
Never wait.
take. Um yeah, so I think it depends for me on the type of stress relief that I'm looking for, but more
Yeah.
significantly, I think the point here is that I read romance and erotica and a lot of other genres as well as stress relief. And so if I'm looking
Mhm.
for a lovely warm place to escape, chances are I'm going to read romance. If I'm looking to unwind or wind myself up so that in my actual life I can unwind in a sexual way, then I'm looking for erotica and I don't really want to get bogged down with too much plot or character development
Yeah.
because I have specific needs in that
Descriptions.
moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it really just depends on what
Yeah.
mood, what's my mood in
Ooh.
relation to what I'm reading.
Mhm.
Uh
Sure.
okay. So what here's this next section of our conversation I feel like is controversial. Do we want to talk about the traditional and classical things because I feel strongly
Right.
opposed.
I see. So again, if this is Romance 101, we have to get I think we should give our audience a baseline. And that's
Okay,
all I intended this section to be, was a baseline.
I guess I would question that baseline because for
Okay,
each person,
great.
well, I feel like for each person the baseline is different, right? So
Absolutely.
for some people, so in your list, I'm gonna catch people up to what I'm looking at in the
Well, I
script.
can how about I tell people what my lists
Yes.
are, and then you
Yes,
can just
please.
rip it apart like my heart. Alri
Oh boy.
Here we go, everyone. The beginning of the end for Elle Skyford. All right, so traditional classic romance. For me, like one of the OG classic romances is Pride and Prejudice, OG Enemies to Lovers. Um, like pretty much anything Jane Austen wrote. I've heard people argue that like Jane Eyre is a romance, and I'm like, hard no, no, thank you. Uh, we have at one point talked about Nora Roberts being a traditional romance writer. I'm trying to think of some other like OG, yeah, Yeah.
So
So
so my rebuttal to that, if you will, it's not really a rebuttal. Pride and
bring
Prejudice
it.
is one of my all-time favorites. But my point is
Yep.
simply that just like you and I sometimes need romance and sometimes we need erotica in our lives,
Mhm.
people define romance in a really different way and chase
Mm.
their specific need for it. So for some people, Nora
Mm.
Roberts is the romance novel that has gotten them into the genre, and all the other market paperbacks, like the paperbacks that were really targeted towards the housewives of the 80s, if you will. But for some people, that isn't the case. And for example, I read a lot of romance now, but I read upmarket romance. I'm putting this in quotation because I don't really understand the publishing lingo as well as I should. But it's the stuff that isn't necessarily in the same on the same shelf as Nora Roberts, but is equally as gushy and lovely, and the happily ever after is still the goal of the story. And I think that so for people who read that versus the other thing, they might this is where the disagreement on what's the OG couple comes from.
I see. I see. Okay. All right. All right. So what's your OG traditional classic romance?
Well, again, I don't know what traditional means to you and what traditional means to me. I'm being a semantic cow,
You're
and I
wearing
realize that.
professorial glasses. I should have expected it.
But so I get so the question that I would pose is what is your barometer for romance? Meaning like what is the book that you are then comparing or all other romance books to? That would be the question
But
for
that's
me.
not the question. The question is which what do you consider to be one of the first romances that fits our definition of romance?
I have no idea. I'm so new to reading romance that I don't have a historical reference at all.
Okay. So what's your barometer book?
I have to think about it real hard.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I think yeah, I don't know. Early Christina Lauren, I guess, for me, because
Yeah.
that's sort of where I jumped into this pool, uh, would
Mhm.
be romance because to me, Pride and Prejudice is classic. Yes, they fall in love. Yes, there is a happily ever after, but I would not quantify it as a romance. But Christina Lauren definitely fits for me into the romance category. So the Roomy or the Wild Ones or Beautiful Bastard would be
Okay.
traditional romance for me. What would be
Okay.
yours?
I mean, I believe Pride and Prejudice to be a romance because it's the inciting incident is when he disses her at the dance, and then the whole story is about all of them getting married. So it's a bunch of romance stories tied all together, and then there's a happily ever after. So I that's the one for me. It's also probably the first or earliest one that I read. Um, the first I'd say very early on, I also read The Time Traveler's Wife, which, made me sob like a baby. So that one is I compare that book to lots of other books that I read. So that's my one of my barometer books. Um, in even more problematic terms for you, let's talk about traditional/classic erotica.
Yeah, so I know, and the first one on your list is 50 Shades, and
I
honestly,
think I think that is going to be the most accessible to people, and so that's
it
why I put it on there, and it's not first, it's just on the list.
yes. Yeah, it's on the list. It's
So
definitely on the list.
so, the sexual relationship that they have in that book the the main plot of the story. Her being introduced to his type of BDSM, uh, that is also extremely important to him, and her character growth is basically dependent on how submissive she is. So, I go with that is for sure an erotica. Um,
Agreed.
we you can read all the articles about how it's problematic and for the BDSM community, but and I think it's also the one that most people have heard of.
Yes. So the other one on this list is The Claiming of Sleeping Beauty, which is an Anne Rice novel written under a different pen name, which
Hold on,
I
everyone look at my t-shirt for a long time while
There you
oh,
go. There you
there we go.
go. Yeah, so she wrote it under a different pen name. It is I would describe it as torture porn. It is
Mm,
also BDSM, and it is a fantasy world. It was written way before 50 Shades, and it was the very first erotica that I read. So if there is a book that I
if you like 50 Shades of Grey, you'll love the Sleeping Beauty trilogy,
well, I gotta
says
tell
the
you that
thing of this book.
I definitely read this. I read The Claiming of Sleeping Beauty 20 years ago.
Mm,
So
mhm,
I'm very sure it predates 50 Shades even without looking it
mhm.
up.
For sure.
Um
Absolutely.
so for
Absolutely.
me that was the very first erotica that I read, and so if
Mhm,
I were to set a bar of any kind or an understanding of a
mhm.
genre, this was my introduction.
Sure. And then as the last one on the list, I think falls under classic erotica, which I haven't read it. I've only heard about it. Again, feels like it falls very much into torture porn. The story of O, it written in 54, I think we looked up today. Also, I think, would we consider anything the Marquis de Sade wrote to be erotica?
I mean, if that's your kink,
If that's your thing,
if
if it
that's your
gets you
thing.
hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, classic erotica.
Someone
Vintage erotica.
Yeah, I believe someone else also argued to us that original Wonder Woman
Mm. Mhm.
comics before they got MPAA'd, before they got stripped of all of its bondage and all of its sexual connotations, would be considered early erotica because
Early
it was one of
erotica.
the
Sure.
first illustrations to
Mm.
have any kind of bondage indicated in it.
Sure. Sure. I guess not having read it, not knowing if the sexual components drive the plot, I can't say one way or another. Maybe perhaps just early pornography as well. Well, not
Yes,
like pornography's been around forever, but comic pornography.
illustrated pornography
Yeah,
of the time. Yeah,
of the time for sure.
great.
Yeah. So there we go.
So
Oh, my
yeah,
barometer for
yes.
erotica. I think we read a lot of paranormal erotica very early on. So Larissa Ione and who else am I thinking? Gina Showalter. Those are where I tend to lean my erotica, tip my hat towards.
I see. So that's where I was sort of heading. Much as I feel a little
Yeah.
out of my depths in claiming classic or traditional books because just no, I just don't know
Mhm.
enough to make those claims, but
Right.
I can tell you what my favorites are and
Right.
steer you in that direction. And so my
Mhm.
romance favorites are all the Talia Hibbard books. Every
Yep.
single Talia Hibbard book that she's
Mhm.
written, every single
Yep.
one.
Yep.
Also Alicia Rye's Forbidden Heart series, which is the one that
Also
predates
very good.
her Modern Love series. So those are
Mhm.
my romance recommendations. And then in erotica,
Wait, wait, let me do mine. Let me do
oh,
mine. We'll
sorry, I
keep
was
it
going to do both
topical.
and then hand it off to you. But yeah,
Nah,
let's do per
we'll keep it
topic.
topical. So we talked about Pride and Prejudice, because I believe it's a romance. I will also drop in. I've only read the newer Kate Claiborne books, but her most recent couple of books have been fantastic. Um, and I also wanted to drop in. Oh my gosh, I just forgot what I was going to say. Oh, Casey McQuiston,
Ah, yes,
Red,
of
White, and
course.
Royal and Blue. Yeah,
Yes. And
and
then I mean, there's so many. And then Helen Hung with Kiss Quotient
oh,
and The Bride
sure.
Test and
Okay.
whatever she's writing
Well,
next. Except this is where it gets controversial.
yeah. The kiss quotient shows up on every best erotica list you can find.
And
because it's about sex.
well, it's about her. Yeah, I mean, she goes out looking for someone to have a sexual relationship with her.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it drives the plot. Maybe it drives the plot. Ugh.
I think so. And the only reason I quantify it as erotica is because there's it's like fresh face erotica. Like it feels like it stands on its own.
Okay.
It's not like dark, smoky rooms, bikers and leather kind of erotica. It's like mini skirts and, tortoiseshell glasses kind of erotica, which I think is just really fun.
Okay.
That's not
Sure.
a reason, but that's why I like it.
Okay, very good. I think technically, I would say most of Beautiful Bastard and definitely the
Mhm.
first of the Wild Ones, the Christina Lawrence,
Mhm.
they are I would put them closer to erotica than to romance. They
Mm.
are driven by a lot of the story is driven by the sexual relationship. So, those are my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and then we've talked about Larissa Ione, Lords of Deliverance series. Gina Showalter also writes a lot of some to a lot of erotica. Um yeah, they're, sex demons. Sex really drives
Yes.
the plot for sex demons.
Lords of the Underworld is the name of the series.
Yeah. Yep. That's the one. So, and then for Larissa Ione, I think about the one with the Lord who has to have sex with somebody new every day. Like that one was definitely erotica.
Yes, definitely.
So yeah. All right. Is did, did we do it?
Did we do
Did
it?
we
Did we
clarify or did
explain?
we
Yeah.
or is it just worse now? Did we make it worse?
It is definitely worse now. Let us know if it's worse now. We'd love to
Did we
know.
make it better? Did we make it worse? We can start a poll.
There we go.
So are you,
Amazing.
dear audience human, gonna pick up this book now that you've heard our review? Let us know in the comments. Have a suggestion for another review? Slide on into our DMs.
If you like this adventure in books or updates on our upcoming projects, please follow, like, save, subscribe, rate, review us on Instagram at l.skyford, on Twitch at lskyford, and on Twitter at skyfordl. Phew. I'm Sky.
And I'm Ford. And that's it for this minisode. We will see you next time on Booklandia, where every book is a whole world to explore.